Ni hao, pimps! This is my favorite sport, and this is my favorite genre of games. I love cars. I have loved them since I was a toddler, and racing was super interesting to me, no matter if it was legal or less legal. And in the world of video games, one franchise stood above the rest to me, and that was Need for Speed. Now in the recent years we had good Need for Speed games like Heat, and not so good games like Unbound. What is important to know is that the games listed above were made by two separate dev studios, for the most part. Now talking about the studios, most of them have a track record that have mixed reception of Need for Speed games overall, except for one studio that had a mostly positive track record up until EA Syndrome hit. Studio that was known as EA Blackbox. Blackbox made genuine bangers since 2003 up till 2011, when EA closed them down. I'm immediately ripping off the band-aid. Yes, the company that is responsible for Need for Speed games that gave the franchise the household title is dead. But how? And are those games good as people say they are, or is it just pure nostalgia? All I know is that you all are in for a treat, as this is a video about Blackbox and Need for Speed bangers. But before I talk about Need for Speed, I have to talk about Blackbox itself. Blackbox was a Canadian company that was founded by ex-Radical Entertainment developers. Now, knowing Radical's experience before Blackbox's inception, which was mostly consisted of games that were not well received, people did not really have high hopes for Blackbox, and the first game they worked on was a port of NASCAR 2001 for the PS1. Now you would think that the limitations of the PS1 would result in a game that was much worse than the at the time next-gen PS2 counterpart. Blackbox made a game that was more fun to play, and even in some occasions looked as good as the PS2 version. Their next two offerings were some NHL games, which apparently the PS2 version was actually very wacky and fun. The big shot that they got was when they were contracted by EA to make a PS2 version of Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. Now, since this isn't a game purely developed by Blackbox, and was originally developed by EA Seattle, it won't get its own section. What you need to know is that Blackbox made a port that was so much better on the PS2 than on literally any other platform. Granted, PS2 was the lead console during the development, but EA Seattle was the lead team since they had more experience in making Need for Speed games. The aftermath of the PS2 port was the fact that EA Seattle was closed down, and Blackbox was bought out by EA and became the lead and only development team for the future mainline Need for Speed games. One thing I will talk about before Blackbox's first Need for Speed, I have to talk about street racing. Street racing was on the boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, where all of the crazy and wacky tuner cars were the center of the attention, especially in the US, and the popularity was capitalized in three major ways. First way was the publication of tuner-related magazine, with the likeness of Import Tuner, Modified Mag, and the biggest one, Super Street, which consisted of crazy-looking cars, women, and some interesting tidbits when it came to tuning cars. Second way were the movies and shows, and whilst there were some tuner-related movies and shows, especially in the East like One Gun Midnight and Megalopolis Expressway, oh that was banned in Japan, all of them pale in comparison to this one small movie, The Fast and the Furious. This movie was at the time so popular and influential, it spawned a long-standing franchise, and more accurately, games. And Blackbox decided that tuners were the flavor of the month, or in this case, the year, and the first title that they worked on was Need for Speed Underground. Underground was truly the first Need for Speed game that introduced me to Blackbox. And oh boy, where do I even start? I'm gonna start off by saying that if you haven't set this video to be 4K or even 1440p, I am encouraging you to do so, even on a display that is 1080p or even 720p. My condolences, by the way. I'm saying that because YouTube's compression will ruin the shit out of the video on 1080p. Now, to talk about the game, first thing you will hear is Get Low, and Blackbox managed to pick a song that genuinely sets off a vibe that the game carries through the entirety of the playthrough. This is something that Blackbox was mostly known for, and don't worry, I will talk about the audio aspect of the game, because I do have a lot to say, but for now, I will talk about the game. Starting off the career, the game shows you what you will expect throughout the playthrough of the game. And my god, the first race of the game tells you a ton, even if it's for a brief moment before the game drags you down into the slums of starter car territory.
Ouch, that is seriously weak, dude.
Artistically and graphically speaking, this game is a complete and stark 180 compared to anything made before it. The cars are now modified, full of vinyls, super shiny and glossy compared to others, and the visuals of the Olympic City map are grainy, with many shades of grey, and few tasteful sprinkles of colors. Now compare that to something like Hot Pursuit 2, where all of the maps are super colorful. Underground's map visually may look more samey, but it was done in a way where the map that you are racing on has key landmarks that are more visually striking and impactful, which Hot Pursuit also had, but in a lesser offering. Even though the game is set in one town, each track has something that sets it apart from the others. For example, some tracks have canals that you can race in, road construction zones which can slow your car down, Chinatown section which is super colorful and a stark contrast visually compared to the rest of the map, back alleyways which end up on a bridge jump and continues with a junkyard, and that building under construction which is a shortcut that also isn't a shortcut because most of the times you will send your car flying and flipping, only to name a few. And to complement that, the map design itself is great. The maps are varied design-wise, but mostly follow the logic of speed is king, where the corners are large to where even in the sharpest of corners you can enter and exit them with good speed. There are a few outliers, but they are far and few between. Shortcuts are a thing, and they can be put into three classes. Actual shortcuts that cut down the track and give you an actual advantage over rivals, shortcuts that are longer than the main road but you end up carrying out more speed, which in return also makes you faster, and troll shortcuts. Overall, the map design is incredibly great, even if there is no free roam, which by the design of the map and with how everything is connected, was probably a feature that was cut from the final game. Of course, map design can be great, but it can only be as good as it can, as the other important aspect of a racing game is the handling. And this game's handling is quite great. The handling is super tight. Granted, tight handling is something that Blackbox pretty much mastered with the PS2 port of Hot Pursuit 2, an aspect that was not the case with Seattle's version. Additionally, the handling itself is super responsive, which makes the driving feel super satisfying at pretty much any speeds. What complements the handling is the sense of speed, or more rather, the implementation of motion blur. The way this game portrays sense of speed is simple yet effective. Whilst the sense of speed is weak while driving the starter cars, once you tune them and reach 200 km per hour, motion blur, and rather intense one, kicks in. It is a little bit disorienting, but it does give you the sense of danger as you are going at a rather fast speed. Hitting the boost though is insane. Fast and Furious portrayed the nitro's usage in such over-the-top way, and Blackbox decided to go, fuck it, we ball, and mimic it. And the result you get is a sudden FOV increase, insane motion blur, and insane speed. The driving aspect of the game is perfect. Well, besides two things. One I will talk about later, and the other being the physics. Whilst for the most parts, the game has solid physics, whenever traffic gets introduced and a collision happens, the game does this. Yeah, traffic collisions are hit or miss. You either crash with no real impact, or you flop around like a fish. One aspect that you do need to know is that the game actively tries to put you back onto your wheels, which is pretty cool. That, however, does come at a cost of having goofy crashes. But this is why I adore Underground. And of course, this game amplifies that by having god-tier audio. To start things off, Blackbox got Hollywood people to do audio mixing, and it paid off. The cars sound amazing, all of the surrounding effects are top-notch, and the music, oh god, the music. Again, Blackbox was known for having a person that knew ball when it came to music choices. This game is no different. Each game's song gives you some kind of an emotion that makes you want to race more. And my god, the music choice is S tier. Oh yeah, I should talk about the other big aspects of the game. The tuning. If you ask people that love Underground, this aspect is usually their favorite, and for a good reason. The tuning is fairly robust considering the fact that not only is Underground a 22-year-old game, but also the fact that the modern Need for Speed games tend to have a worse tuning system. Starting off with the performance parts, because it's less impressive, there are upgrades that improve the handling, acceleration, and top speeds. Some parts tend to upgrade multiple aspects of the car, most of them are beneficial. Level 3 parts that the game give you are super important. For example, the RX-7 is a 5-speed car. Transmission level 3 gives it a 6th gear. That is the case for all of the 5-speed cars in the game. Engine upgrades give the engines a visual makeover each level. Visual tuning is what is impressive. This game has all of the things you like. Front bumpers, back bumpers, side skirts, light, both front and rear, mufflers, spoilers, hoods, rims, roof scoops, paint finals, and much more. There are a ton of parts, but you have to unlock them, as parts are unlocked by playing the game. Performance parts are unlocked by winning tournaments. There are 9 performance parts in total, and each tournament unlocks 3 parts. Visual parts are unlocked over time. Each parts are split into tiers. Each higher tier has a higher star rating, which is a cool feature in this game. Each star rating that you achieve gets you on a magazine. Which, I mean, it's a cool feature, but Jesus, these look... wow. You might be asking yourself, how fun is this game? I like to separate this game into 3 sections. The first section that is there to teach you how the game works. It is a little bit boring as the cars are slow, and there are no substantial upgrades. Once you complete a few tournaments and unlock parts and a few cars, you reach the second stage. The second stage of the game, which starts around 30th event. It's the most fun part of the game that you will experience. There will be a bit of a challenge, but the maps are varied and you get better upgrades, making your car considerably faster. Stage 3, which starts at around 80th event, is the Hell Zone. Maybe he crashes. Okay, at this point, okay. This is where 2 aspects of the game shows themselves at a full display. The traffic is insane. There is a ton of it, and they tend to show up in the most inconvenient places, crashing you out. That was just dog shit. And if you crash out, you better pray that the AI does not catch up. This game has Rubber Band, which is a feature to artificially make the game harder by giving AI extra power and grip dynamically. Problem that you might already guess is the fact that the Rubber Band is insane. Yeah, at the stage 3 of the game, Rubber Band gets super annoying, especially as near the end game, most of the circuit events are 6 laps long. Which, speaking of events, I should talk about them quickly. You have circuits and sprints, which are straightforward. Lap knockouts knocks the last place each map. Again, straightforward. Drag racing is a bitch. I mean, look, it certainly isn't horrible, but the traffic and the fact that you are stuck in a lane without free steering, but rather a mobile phone-esque temple run-ass lane switching system, makes the event bullshit. Drag racing maps themselves are cool. A decent bunch of them end on a jump, which is super epic. Drifting is cool. You drift in specific drift-made tracks where your goal is to do better than the rivals. You can play it safe and drift on the road, or you can enter these bonus zones which are near the walls, which if you do hit, cancel the drift and the combo, but give you much more points. It's a nice risk-reward system, which is complemented by the angle and the speed you drift. Faster you are and the higher the angle, you will gain more points. Once you stop drifting, you get to bank the points. If you continue drifting though, you can gain a combo. Combo is earned by exceeding a threshold in a consecutive drift, and of course, higher the combo, more points you get. Honestly, 5 times combo is quite insane. There are time events that give you special parts that are either visual or performance. And that is it when it comes to this game. For Blackbox's first mainline offering, it's quite an amazing offering, and it showed because this game was the top seller at the time, and is quite possibly the second most sold Need for Speed game. And this is my third favorite Need for Speed game. The next one though, was a massive change, for the better and worse. But before that, I got Discord. That's it. Now it's time for Underground 2. This game is interesting to me as I have a somewhat love-hate relationship with it, and I'm going to be a little experimental with this section of the game. Instead of the usual, I will kinda separate the review into stages that this game does. To explain, this game has 5 stages, and each stage unlocks a new part of the map and new events, to name a few things. And my experience varied depending on the stage I was in. Granted, varied is an overstatement, but eh. To start things off with, we have stage 1 and 2 of the game. I love stage 1. Introduction of this game is so amazing. You get a flyover of the Bayview airport, which then moves to the hero car of the game, the 350Z. Rachel's 350Z, which she borrowed to you, so you can drive yourself to the car lot to buy a first car, as this game has an open world. Now you can drive yourself to the car lot, or if you are like me, you will notice that there are 2 other markers on the minimap. And this game gives you a small taste of how the racing will be in this game with those markers, each color-coded marking the type of the race. This game has brought all of the event types from Underground, which are circuits, sprints, drag races, and drifts. I will expand on drifts later, but we have to get back to Rachel. And if you do the races, she gets more and more upset.
Hey man, I want my car back. You better haul over here ASAP or I'm putting the word out on you. And that means no more racing till I say so. Get over here, now.
Oh, she's mad. Nevertheless, you have to buy 1 car, and the starter list is pretty alright. But since I am from Balkan, only one of those were mine. A Peugeot 106, a small car, actually pretty sick looking car, and then a... never mind. Off to the world of Bayview I went, and it is really varied. The main starter city, City Core, is really similar to Olympic City's downtown. However, if you go closer to the edges, you get to see stuff like the sea, and a rather lack of buildings. And if you're driving throughout the map, you might discover some different color-shaped light poles. Driving towards those will reveal tuning shops, each color-coded just like the race types. You have Body Shop, where you can modify the body parts of your car, just like in the first Underground game. Car Specialties Shop, where you can live out your racer dreams by slapping on neons everywhere, trunk audio, hydraulics, and much more. Graphics Shop, where you can paint your cars and add decals or liveries. And Performance Shop, where, well, you get performance upgrades and where you can tune your car. You can fine-tune your car in the dyno, but you can also avoid that aspect. One thing that is important to know is that you can tune your car right and make a car with a ton of grip, or you can do the opposite, which will result in a broken controller after 20 failed drift runs. But Chris, how is the racing? It's alright. I feel like the sense of speed is a fair bit weaker than the previous game, but it's still decent. The handling is super tight. Granted, at the start of the game, you really won't go super fast and have issues with handling. The races is where it gets a bit interesting. Whilst most of the events that are brought back are the same, there is a change and an addition to roster. Drift events have changed compared to the first game. Whilst this type of drift events is similar to the first game, the new addition is the fact that there are rivals drifting alongside you. It's a cool system. There is a bit of an oversight. Whilst hitting the wall ends the drift and voids the score earned, hitting rivals does not do that, so you can use the rivals as a safe wall. Street X is a new event. It is basically a super short circuit with what seems like a tighter handling model. If you tuned your car properly, you can really enter sharp corners at high speeds, giving you a large gap between the rivals. A funny thing is that sometimes the AI can fumble and ram each other into a wall. Outrun is a new quote-unquote event type where rivals are spread across the map, and you challenge them to a 1v1, where the goal is to outrun the enemy. Damn, I can see where the event name has come from. You have to be 300 meters ahead of the rival to beat them. It's quite useless in stage 1, but it gets important later down the line. A certain amount of outrun wills will give you special unlocks. To unlock them though, you need to reach a specific shop below a certain time to get it. Outrun is a cool event. It has one flaw, a large one. To end the event, you need to outrun the rival, or be outrun. Problem with that is that the rubber band in this game is present, albeit weaker than Underground. Corners should be avoided at all costs, as AI just zooms through those. You can compare this event type to Tokyo Extreme Racer's battles. However, Tokyo Extreme Racer has a health system. Outrun does not have that. It doesn't even have a time limit, so outruns can last from under a minute to almost 10, if not more. One thing I did notice, and a rather Prostreet, is that spinning out rivals grants you an easy win. I guess that's good to know. Once you complete those races, you get to stage 2. Stage 2 unlocks Beacon Hill, and the map, whilst visually is mostly the same, layout-wise is much more different, as the roads are more curvy and function kinda like a showcase of what is to come with stage 3. You unlock a new set of stores which give you a new level of upgrades visually and performance-wise. Racing is mostly the same, except now you have an obligation to do some events. One race in and you will unlock the ability to sign a sponsor. Each have different requirements and each give you a different payout. Race requirements may be different from each other, but they all share one set of requirements, the star rating. You see, every time you tune a car visually, you get points in the star rating. Every visual part will give you a star rating, higher level ones will give you more points for the star rating. It's quite simple, and at this stage, you really don't have an issue with the star rating, as you can still use level 1 body kits and get the desired star rating. After you clear the star rating, you get to show off your car on a DVD cover, which is a crucial part of the game. You see, if you don't do those DVD covers, you simply cannot progress through the game. Honestly, not a huge pain at this point, as it's 1-star cover and you probably have a car that clears the rating requirement. One final addition to the game is the Underground Racing League, and this is a small circuit that is like an official tournament event and pays off massively. Now there is only one URL event, and it's one race, so you think that 3 minutes is pretty fast for a decent payout. This event, in its current showing, is very deceiving, and Stage 3 shows that. Stage 3 unlocks Jackson Heights. I hate Jackson Heights. You only get 2 shops, both visual only, so the performance upgrades, or more accurately, one, can be unlocked from doing outrun events and doing a set amount of races, as a certain race count unlock parts. This, however, is the least of this map's issue. Every event is so far apart, and whilst visually the map is kinda cool, the layout is just curves and bends. You will spend most of the times driving from one event to the other, and it can take long to reach those, because most of those curves I mentioned are rather sharp, forcing you to slow down. This is where one core issue of Underground 2 starts to become very noticeable. There is no fast travel. Whilst at the start of the game, it's not a problem, Jackson Heights really showcases how much of a pacing killer or a lack of this feature is. Especially if you have to go through top of the Jackson Heights to the airport area. Honestly, if they included shop-based fast travel, I would have had less issues with the pacing. This stage has added a new event type with the addition of new car series, the SUVs. The SUVs only serve purpose for a new event type that is called SUV races. Do you want to know what SUV races are? Well, so do I. I have not done those events at all, as I would rather do a Brazilian Vax with a blowtorch than play those events. Drift events have also undergone a small change. Once you can drift in closed circuits with other rivals, you can now also do it on the Jackson Heights areas, which honestly kinda give off a Togue drift vibe. There are no rivals, so the score that you get at the start of the race is final. So hey, you at least know what you need to score to win. Problem is that this event expects you to have the 5x multiplier, and whilst that is possible, you really need the bonus areas to get that multiplier with some effort. Problem is that those bonus areas are super inconsistent. You have to be near cars or be in certain long areas to get a bonus multiplier. Area-wise, it isn't really problematic as it's fairly consistent and you can genuinely pull out 20k drift points. Traffic bonus zones are just luck at sometimes. Hill drift honestly just kinda feels whack in my opinion. I think if it was a 1v1 it would have been more fun. URL events fucking suck. It has multiple races per event and it drags on. It genuinely ruins the game's pacing. Stage 4 and 5 honestly are not that different, and I kinda gave up near the end of the game. You see, I wanted to do all of these games as vanilla as possible with only the widescreen fix, and in Most Wanted's case, Xbox 360 version textures and reflections. But holy shit, the URL events dragged on for so long, to the point where on stage 5, I just didn't want to do 9 goddamn URL events in a row in this vanilla state. So I modded the shit out of the game and installed the 1-lap mod. And even that still dragged on for like almost half an hour to do them. And the funniest part, the final race, where you race the leader of like the whole fucking town or whatever, Caleb, you find out he's a fucking pushover. Amazing. Yeah, never mind when I said that I have a love-hate relationship with this game. I really hate it. One thing I guess I can positively say at the end is that the music is alright, a bit weaker than Underground in my opinion and the next few games. The wide body kits are silly. The fact that it's one of the 2 black box titles with a replay mode. And the fact that we were gifted with a blessing of a meme in a form of Black Betty ear rape.
Okay, we got our 1-star rating. We needed that. Fuck!
But yeah, this game is really just kind of whack. I guess it's why it sold less than Underground. And to people that think Underground 2 is the best Need for Speed, and that everybody else is wrong if they think that the other Need for Speeds are better, well...
Get fucked! Fuck you! Fuck you! Never come back, bitch! All of you! Every single last one of you! I never want to see you ever fucking again!
Most Wanted is the next Need for Speed game that released, and it was the one that undeniably went the hardest. Before I start talking about this game, I do have to say, this is one of the 2 games in the franchise that I have played at least a dozen times. I really love this game, but it's definitely nostalgia speaking. You see, Most Wanted was my introduction to the Need for Speed franchise, and ever since the first time I played it, every replay I do with Most Wanted gives me a wide grin on my face. That is impressive, as yet again, there is only one other Need for Speed game that does the same thing. Additionally, if it weren't for this game, I probably wouldn't have made that bunny hopping video that made me want to do more content creation. Which honestly, in itself is a wild thing that I never thought I would do. Anyways, it is time I talk about the game that shaped my music taste and my car taste. Do know, I have made a video of Most Wanted 2 years ago, and I can say confidently that my writing has improved. You can go and watch it, but the mixing is just bad. I can easily say that this game is extremely fun. It's one of those games that you can genuinely pick up on a Monday, play for a few hours, only to realize it's 5 in the morning and it's a Thursday, and you have a wall of empty Red Bull cans behind you. I'm going to flip the script for this game, and I will talk about the one negative aspect of this game first. While some people think that Most Wanted is the most perfect video game ever made with no flaws whatsoever, the game does have a flaw. And one of them, which is rather large, is its pacing. Now, the game is fast progression-wise, after you beat someone like Izzy or Big Lou. Anything before, and you'll notice that the game is quite slow. And it is most noticeable in the racing aspect of the game. Frankly, the racing itself is the weakest part of this game. Most of the events have been brought from Underground 2, with the exception of Street X and URL races, which, considering that this racing is super illegal compared to last game's just illegal, those race types wouldn't fit. Another removed race type are the drift events, and the replacements are tool booth races, which are glorified checkpoint races, speed trap events where you need to go past the speed trap faster than the rivals, and the lap knockout events, which suck ass and I will refuse to even cover. With that covered, doing races tends to feel like a chore. To really prove this point, I completed this run of the game by doing as few circuit races as possible, as those last the longest. With that out of the way, and with rage baiting the Most Wanted glazers into getting hooked on this video to see what rest I will talk about this game, it's time to talk about all of the positives this game does. This game looks amazing. Okay, maybe not for the GameCube fellas out there, but for the rest of the devices that got released, this game looks amazing. One version where the game genuinely stands out is the Xbox 360 version, and if it wasn't for the emulation of the game still being a bit fucky, I would have probably used that version, as it was pretty much a next-gen remaster of the base version of Most Wanted. So for the time being, I used the next-gen mods to make the game match the 360 version on the PC. And it really shows. The details are great, the lighting is amazing. Only one other Blackbox game comes close to it. The textures are high res, the reflections amazing. The game really does look great, even with its classic 2005 era piss filter with the visual grading consisting of whatever you can find in the toilet, with the overly aggressive bloom, which is noticeable in the live action cutscenes. Oh, this is the first Blackbox Need for Speed game where the story is kinda fleshed out and kinda matters compared to the previous titles. Notice how I say kinda? Yeah, the story nowadays is a bit cringe, and believe me, it wasn't better received in 2005, especially the cutscenes. The cutscenes are impressive and use a mix of real-world green screen footage which is slapped over 3D renders of the scenery and, more importantly, the cars. Now, I say impressive, but that is purely because in typical 2005 fashion, the effects have been turned up to 11, so you really can't see the imperfections that usually come with this mix of green screen acting in 3D environments. Granted, you really can't see shit at all because the bloom is insane, but hey, if it works, it works. I won't spoil the story of a 20-year-old game. This game can almost legally drink in the United States, and quite possibly some of you watching this might be younger than the game itself. Jesus Christ, I am old. To get back from me regretting my life choices and actually talking about the game is fun. You see, unlike Underground 2, Most Wanted doesn't have an endgame problem. As you see, early game is the only slow part, and even that can be fun, and I will explain a bit later. The car roster has changed. There are tuners like the previous game, but with this game being more serious, you also get high-end supercars, sports cars, and even a Cadillac CTS for some reason. The main star of the show is the BMW M3 GTR, a racing car that is so rare that it's a miracle that EA got to 3D scan the car to use it in their own game. And the sound... My god, the sound. It is magical. The engine sound is from a TBR, but that straight-cut gearbox really completes how the car sounds in-game. Tuning has returned, and whilst the visual tuning option is much weaker in Underground 2, consisting of only body kits instead of separate parts, with no option to install stuff like hydraulic, neons, and radio parts, cars visually look better. Genuinely. The body kits in Underground 2 are butt ugly. In Most Wanted, they're tolerable, at the least. Performance tuning is the same, and the accessibility is so much better. Firstly, unlike in Underground 2, tuning sections are all now placed into one shop, which means that I don't have to go to 3 separate shops spread across the town to tune my car. Additionally, the way you unlock the parts is much more simpler than in Underground 2, as you need to breed certain Blacklist tribals to unlock parts. The game structure is pretty cool. You have 15 Blacklist members to beat, to challenge Razor, the #1 guy on the Blacklist. Now each member has a ton of personalities, especially when you look at their bios, but one stands out of them all. Ronnie. Dude shared that hell yeah vibe to the table that people seem to like.
This here is the number 15 guy on the blacklist. You got a lot of rep to earn before you get to run with him.
Thanks for the update.
To get back to the Blacklist, to challenge a member you need to do a certain amount of race milestones and certain amount of bounties. Milestones can be earned by beating speed traps, which require you to beat the speed that the traps set, or the other way, which I will talk about in a bit. Races are self-explanatory and can be a bit boring. If you do the races with maximum heat though, shit can get rough. Oh yeah, this game has cops. Whilst not first to the franchise, it is by far the best implementation of the system. Cops are here to try to stop you from racing by any means possible. Cops are separated into heats, and there are 5 heats that you will experience. Game starts off with only giving you heat 1, but as the game progresses, you will unlock more heats. Now heat 1 and 2 are honestly quite bad. The cops have a reaction time of a dead horse, and they really don't want to bust you, as you can outrun them by driving slowly. Heat 3, however, is where they start treating you more violently, and it's the heat where roadblocks become super common. Heat 4 is even more aggressive, and Heat 5 is basically the heat where spike strip roadblock spam becomes a thing, and if you hit the spike strips, it's basically lol, lamau even, you're fucked. You do have one advantage over them. You can commit murders and executions. To explain, unlike you, the cops have a health system, and you can ram them to break them. Cops also have a realistic mass ratio, so hitting them in front where the engine is, and more masses, will deal less damage and may potentially screw you over, compared to hitting them in the rear, where hits are more critical. Is this system unfair, as you are practically invincible? No. Whilst newer Need for Speed games have a player health system, the cops mostly suck. That purely comes down to the fact that in Most Wanted, the cops are aggressive and not afraid to try and ram you off the road and box you in, which they can be competent at doing so. Ramming the cops is the best way of not letting them box you in, and whilst ramming them is fairly fun, it can be much funner if you hit them with a speed breaker. Speed breaker is a feature where you slow down time and your car gains shit ton of grip and infinite mass. In races it can be helpful, but in cop chases it really is useful, as you can send the cop flying. If you don't want to ram cops, there are crash breakers, which are sceneries scattered across the map, which once broken will wreck out cops that get in its way. The cop chases are by far the best part of Most Wanted, and they tie in well into the progression. Each Blacklist has its own set of challenges, and most boil down to doing stuff like hit the police, wreck the police, cause this amount of financial damages, get this amount of bounty, outrun the cops in under over a set amount of time, and etc. The cop system itself is amazing. I did talk about the heats, but I didn't talk about the cop AI itself. Whilst yes, the first and the second heat are piss easy, third heat and onward start to show where the AI becomes smart. They will do a pit maneuver, ram you, and even block you in. Whilst that is impressive, another impressive fact is the fact that you can hear them, as the game has a fairly robust police chatter system. Every action a cop does will be transmitted to you, and the game had like 10,000 lines if not more. Additionally, the tenseness of the chases gets multiplied by the dynamic soundtrack that this game has. Yes, it has a dynamic soundtrack when it comes to cop chases. Every action you do will trigger a certain track, and the game has a ton of tracks. I have talked about the cop chase music, but Chris, how good is the game's racing OST? Yeah, no, even after hearing it for almost 20 years constantly, it still fucks. This game is one of those big ones that are responsible for my taste in music, and this mix of new metal, rock, and rap really fit this game. In fact, let me talk about music in racing games in general. When it comes to licensed music section in racing games, there are two notable aspects that the developers need to consider. First one being, if the music itself is good. You cannot just take random songs and slap them on expecting people to like said songs. If you pick a bad song, chances are that people will not like it, no matter how good the game is. Great example would be Need for Speed Heat, with the game being rather good, but the songs being dog shit. Second thing that should be considered is if the music fits the game they are in. And when it comes to Blackbox, I find that 3 games that they have developed have songs that check those 2 criteria with flying colors. First game is Underground, second game is this game, and the third game is the game that I will talk about a little bit later. Seriously, this game has such bangers like Blinded in Chains, Bullet for My Valentine, One Good Reason, just to name a few. Oh, and that one part of Skinny Man where you need to use the nitros. I just covered the career mode by the way only. There's an extra mode called the challenge mode, where you either have to do tall booth races or cop events. It's a pretty fun side mode that is a pretty cool bonus. Now you might think that this is probably my favorite Need for Speed game. Nah, it's actually my second favorite. The favorite Need for Speed is the one that I will talk about right now. And that is Need for Speed. I forgot about Carbon. Carbon is a very interesting game. I really don't like this game, but I also really don't hate it. I think it mostly comes down to how unfortunate this title is. At this time, Blackbox was split into 3. One team was working on Most Wanted, other team was working on a new IP that was rivaling Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, and the third team was working on Carbon. Visually, this game is a step up over Most Wanted. Piss filter is gone, and the game is much more colorful than the previous titles. Games set at night usually look good, but this game is honestly 4th best looking game set at night on the Xbox 360, PS3 era of consoles. Racing itself wise has stayed the same, with the return of drift events. Drift event types return. There are closed track drift events and canyon drift events. Drifting is quite possibly the best in the Need for Speed franchise, but purely cause it's chaotic. You see, this game has separate handling model for racing and for drifting. And drifting model, especially with grip wheels, is just cars being on crack. The multiplier bonus is gone, instead the faster you go, the more points you gain. Bonus zones return, but are honestly not that necessary, as you can drift at insane speeds which give you a ton of points, and it's genuinely very fun. A new feature of this game is the turf system, where you start racing in enemy territories, and after you do most of the races in the territory, you will get introduced to the territory leader. Leaders are basically bosses, and once you take all of the territories you can fight the leaders. You do a race, which is a regular circuit race, and a canyon event. Yeah, if you take over a part of your territory, rivals turn into bloodthirsty bloodhounds that try to take back the territory. These are not optional, and you can't send crewmates to defend the territory. You have to fight for the territory part yourself. It's a cool idea, but it is an annoying execution, especially later down the line. Anyways, canyons are practically togue sprint events, and whilst you have regular sprint events on those maps, with leaders, you have 2 heats. First heat is when you are chasing the leader, and the closer you are, more points you get. Second heat is where you are being chased, and the points you get from the first heat will now be drained by the leader. The further away you are from the leader, you will lose less points. You can avoid the second heat if you simply overtake the leader in the first heat. Just watch out, and don't yeet yourself out of a cliff, cause the guardrails do the opposite of the word guard. After you beat a leader, you get a new type of event on your turf called Race Wars. The game has a game mode called Race Wars. Yep. Now you might ask yourself, Chris, how useful are Race Wars? Race Wars are not useful at all. My problem with Race Wars is that only thing you get from winning them is a larger sum of cash. It's a shame Race Wars could have been good if it functioned where if you completed it and won, you would lock the territory out of it getting attacked. Car roster is quite cool and varied even. Additionally, car choice matters, as there are 3 car types in the game: tuner, muscle, and exotic. Now, whilst those classes have been present in all previous titles, Carbon mixes it up by making each class have distinct handling features. Exotics are the highest performing cars with the greatest top speeds of all classes that are mostly balanced. Muscle cars have insane torque and acceleration, but horrible top speed and slip and slide handling, and tuners have the best handling at the cost of having a lower top speed. It is a cool system, and each class has its own purpose. One other feature that I will touch upon briefly is that ties with the classes is the soundtrack. The game rocks a huge variety of songs, ranging from hip-hop with notable songs like Hype Boys by Sway and Bounce by Dynamite MC, to rock with songs like Joker and the Thief by Wolfwater, and Signs of Life by Every Move a Picture, and electronic music with songs like Sugar by Ladytron and Feel the Rush by Junkie XL. That name will be important in a little bit. I was going to critique this part as I remember me not being able to change it, but each genre was locked behind the car class. Exotic had hip-hop, muscle had rock, and tuner had EDM. Now the problem in my case when I played this the first time was that I had played the game with tuners primarily, and considering that I'm not a huge EDM fan, especially with how the genre just didn't fit Carbon that well, and the fact that the amount of electronic songs in the game could be counted on my fingers really put me off. It took me only till recent playthrough to realize that I can just simply turn that feature off. With that feature off, I can say that the soundtrack is alright. Again, some of these picks are really odd, but it's nothing that makes me not like the soundtrack. Main menu music was epic, especially the fact that each class also had its own main menu soundtrack. To get back to cars, tuning was made more accessible with the fact that there is no more tuning houses that you have to drive to. Tuning was now a menu in the garage. Performance tuning got a bit of a change, where after you pick a car, you could fine-tune what you wanted out of your car. I.e., if you wanted more torque or horsepower when you tuned the engine, if you wanted more top speed or better acceleration when you picked the transmission, or if you wanted more powerful boost or a longer lasting one if you picked nitros, to name a few examples. Visual tuning got a huge overhaul with the introduction of Autosculpt. Autosculpt is a feature where you can take a preset body panel and shape it however you want. You can have bigger gaps on the bumpers, deeper cuts on the hood, hell, you could even chop your roof however you liked. Whilst now outdated looking design-wise, Autosculpt was a cool feature that sadly lasted way too shortly. Racing got a huge upgrade in a matter of who you're racing with. This is the first and only game where you had Wingman. Wingman is a cool feature where you have a teammate that has a certain role in the game. Blocker Wingman takes down rivals, Burnout style. Draft Wingman goes in front of you and lets you draft them by giving you increased speed, nitros refill, and quite importantly, grip. You can see where this is going if you played this game before. Scout Wingman is OP. Their primary job is to find shortcuts, but because of the fact that they need to be in front of you, they go really fast. That in return leads to them usually being at the top of pretty much every event type. That's it. This part of the review is as short as the game is. I remember as a kid playing Carbon on the Xbox, completing the game in like 3 days and going, wait, this is it? Did I just waste my money? This game is super short, and it's quite easy to see why. Whilst there are a ton of races, that is all you do really. With Most Wanted, you also had cop events. The cops are seemingly improved in Carbon. I say seemingly, as the amount of interactions with the cops I had in Carbon could be counted on my left hand. They serve no real purpose in this game, and can be avoided entirely. There are challenge events just like they were in Most Wanted, and whilst they are tiered, which gives you more challenges, they prove no real purpose, especially if you do the career first. This can be all chalked down to one thing: EA. This is the first game that showed the yearly cycle fatigue, and whilst Need for Speed would keep on being a yearly title up to 2013, it was clear that the team was overworked. Carbon was supposed to have a better story that was longer and had more cohesion to it. Cops would have played a bigger role, and the game itself would have just been more polished out. But EA was EA, and EA does one thing best. They suck companies dry, and Carbon was truly Blackbox's patient zero. Just be glad that I didn't use a PS3 version. Now whilst I didn't enjoy Carbon, the next game is what I consider to be peak Need for Speed game. And that is funny, as at the time this was the most divisive Need for Speed. It is finally time I talk about Prostreet. But first, a little bit of an intermission. Hideo Kojima is an interesting man. He made Metal Gear games, he also made Death Stranding, but most importantly, the dude reviews movies. Now, when he watches movies, he quickly goes onto Twitter and posts about them. When he likes the movies, he makes basically short essays about the movies, explaining what he liked. When he doesn't like the movies, he just says, I watched this and that. Keep that in mind, it's going to be a little bit important later down the line. Anyways, it's time to talk about Prostreet. This is my favorite Need for Speed game. Now watch as I completely proceed to shit on it first. I'll let another Prostreet glazer talk about the big issues.
Now I want to preface this section before I say anything about this game, because Need for Speed Prostreet is not just my favorite Need for Speed game, not just my favorite racing game, but is in contention for my favorite game of all time. Now let me tell you why it sucks. The game can feel a little floaty in the grip events, which is compounded by the roughly 200 milliseconds of input delay built into the game's physics. They got rid of a lot of the customization from the tuner era games like individual body parts, bringing us back to the all kits all the time system from Most Wanted. There's some noticeable polish issues with this game, even more on the PC port that I'm playing it on. This probably has the second biggest swings in difficulty of this era, only next to the game after Prostreet, and the campaign can be a slog in the later stages, to the point where this and Porsche were the only two Need for Speeds I actually had to repeat events in before I was fully comfortable with the physics and mechanics, because of how punishing the mid-late game can be and how stingy it can get with rewards. Now, I wanted to get all my major criticisms out the way first when talking about Prostreet, because even though it's my favorite, it's far from perfect.
And now that the worst aspects of the game have been covered, it's glazing time. Firstly, this game was developed by the Blackbox team that made Most Wanted, so they had time to do a ton of work. And they did. The team re-recorded car sounds, did car driving to get a great feel of handling to translate to the game, which granted, it didn't work out that great and generally overhauled the engine. And the work they have done? Amazing. In fact, nah, fuck it. I'm going to go all over the place. This section will have no cohesion. Firstly, you have to go in with the expectation that this is a closed circuit racer, so no open world, no cops. The story is there, although Ryo Watanabe is portrayed well as an egotistical asshole.
You know, yeah, okay, the guy won, but he did not look pretty behind the wheel. It physically pained me to watch that guy drive, you know what I'm saying?
Ryan Cooper has come all the way from winning late-night street races to becoming our new showdown king. Oh, yeah! And Ryo Watanabe has given up his crown and his car, folks.
And most importantly, no, it is not Most Wanted. No other game is Most Wanted, and no other game will ever be Most Wanted. Prostreet is Prostreet. It's its own thing, and not every Need for Speed game needs to be Most Wanted, alright? With that out of the way, this is a festival racer. But not just any festival racer. This is by far the first festival racer, and my god, they have nailed it. The vibe, the crowd, the fact that Blackbox took mostly boring looking maps, added a ton of crowd, a ton of decoration, and overall spiced up the scenery is genuinely something that no other festival has managed to do. Forza Horizon was the closest though, so there is that. Audio is fucking amazing. Car sounds being re-recorded with better equipment meant that cars generally sound better overall. Cars sound distinctly different, and every upgrade affects how your cars sound. Especially the Tier 3 straight cut gearbox. That whine you hear is amazing. Another amazing thing is the amount of detail with the announcers. This game has almost 2 hours of the announcer commenting on everything that is happening in the event, which includes, but is not limited to, in-race event like crashing, reaching the first place, leading the lap, winning events, losing events, attending race days with exotic cars, entering races with wacky cars, just to name a few. Oh, and there are multiple announcers, each representing their own organization. Now this game is cool, but the car audio and announcers can only do so much when it comes to this game's enjoyment. And I think it is time I talk about the music. Prostreet has a mix of rock and EDM. EA even hired Junkie XL to do original score, whilst also adding some songs from Booming, Back at You, and My God. Now I'm not an EDM fan, but his work, especially with how this game plays, fits so fucking well. I would be lying if I said that this is not my favorite soundtrack. Seriously, the game has a shit ton of bangers like Almost Easy, On Fire, Escape, Garage Japan, and No Good, just to name a few. And my god, listening to some of these songs just fucking rocks. Escape on shootout sectors fits amazingly, and listening to No Good while driving 370 on a Nevada highway doing a top speed event is adrenaline pumping. Seriously, the soundtrack is one of the highlights of the entire franchise, to be completely honest. And that's just the audio. Car list has expanded, and with DLC cars, this was at the time the largest car list in a Need for Speed title. The game was also the first Need for Speed game that had DLC. The car variety is also insane, and it might be the most varied Need for Speed game at the time. You have the funny drift car, a good bunch of hot hatches like the Golf is better and the Golf is better on crack, sports cars, sedan, supercars, muscle cars, Seat for some reason, just to name a few. And Blackbox tied this all up with the class system. When buying a car, you are presented with an option of picking what class you want the car to be. Yes, you now have to have multiple cars for certain event types. You have grip classes, which are cars that are circuit built with the best handling for circuit races, time trials, and sector knockouts. Time trials are effectively races where you and 3 other rivals race for the shortest lap time to win. Sector knockouts are cool. There are 4 checkpoints, and passing a checkpoint, you get the score that counts down. Passing a checkpoint with the most remaining points puts you as a sector leader, and if you lead all 4 of these sectors, you get a bonus, which is very useful for winning. Drift class, and thus drift events, are self-explanatory. You have a part of a track, and the goal is to get the most points out of the 3 heats that you do. Combos are gone. And you have a more basic counting system where the angle and speed matters. By now you might have noticed that the handling is different. Each class has a different handling model, which will be important later, and drift handling is easy to learn, difficult to master. But once you get good at it, and chain bonuses that you get like Nitro's bonus, high speed drifting, long drifting, and staying on track, you can really get a high score that could break a track record. Now, whilst Prostreet's drifting is a downgrade from the previous titles, it personally is more fun as it has that extra soul put into it with the announcers and the music playing from the stadiums themselves. Fuck Tokyo Dockyard though, that map is fucking ass. Drag class has 2 event types, drag racing and wheelie competition. A new mechanic is heating up tires. Before the race starts, you need to do a burnout to gain grip. The better you do, the better the launch grip is. Drag racing is effectively the same as it was in previous titles, except you need to launch the car yourself and you can jump the start and get disqualified. Additionally, you are not lane locked, so you can steer freely. Granted, you're not gonna need to steer. Wheelie competitions are interesting as the goal is to do the longest wheelie, and here car choices matter. Whilst car types don't matter in grip racing, Drift really expects you to get a lighter car with shorter wheelbase to do good drifts. Drag racing, and more accurately, wheelie competitions, require you to have a muscle car. Just like in Carbon, muscle cars have insane torque, and whilst wheelie physics are all on rear-wheel drive cars, muscle cars can really go far. That or McLaren F1. Speed class has two event types: speed challenges, which are basically sprint event, and top speed runs, which are speed trap events. Now, whilst those events could have been in the grip class, what makes these events special is the speed class itself, which will teach you few important factors. Firstly, the physics. Immediately, you will notice that out of all classes, speed class has the most grip, the fastest acceleration, and the most twitchy handling. Every car has that handling model, and drivetrains don't matter. Secondly, drafting is important. Whilst drafting is really good in grip class, speed class drafting is something else. You gain a ton of acceleration when you draft, and if tuned right, you will reach the max speed limit that the game has. Third thing that the game really teaches you is the sense of speed and how its implementation works. Sense of speed is a very crucial aspect of a racing video game, as it tends to be a good indicator of how fast you are going. Sense of speed can be portrayed in multiple manners, ranging from having a wider field of view, a shifting field of view where at higher speeds the FOV is higher, to something like a simple camera shake. Now, a high sense of speed is cool, but it is very situational. For example, if you're playing a sim racer, you'd want to have a lower sense of speed, as you need to see clearly what is up ahead to make correct adjustments. Arcade racers don't have to worry about that, so usually the sense of speed is rather high, and Prostreet takes that to another level. The game already has a wider field of view, but the camera shake you get is large, especially at 300 km per hour. It's really insane. Now obviously Blackbox was reasonable, to where if you are not holding the gas trigger, the camera will not shake. But once you step on the gas, the sense of speed really turns into sense of danger, as you sometimes feel like one wrong move could take you out of a race. And some tracks like Nevada Speedway really try to actively screw you over with its bumpy roads. That sense of danger only gets elevated when you realize that the game has a damage model, and terminal damage. Prostreet is the first game in many years where you can actively damage your car, and it was revolutionary in 2007. Sure, it was not flat out 2 or Burnout Revenge levels of good, but the mesh deformation system was fairly well made, with parts that can fall off. Additionally, the damage system was revolutionary because at the time it had the most extensive damage model on licensed cars. And if you know car brands, they are really picky about what can or can't be damaged. So how does damage work? You have 4 conditions that your car can be in. First condition is no damage, where the car genuinely looks spotless with no to minimal visual damage. Second condition is light damage, where the car has visual only damage, and whilst the damage can be very noticeable to the point where cars do tend to look like a write-off, the parts that are damaged are non-crucial and performance is effectively unchanged. Third condition is heavy damage, where the car has noticeably worse performance. The car will accelerate, steer and brake slower. Additionally, the camera shake gets even more amplified to the point where driving under heavy damage is genuinely scary, where any movement you make could be a run-ender. Which brings me to the fourth condition: wrecked. Yeah, you're effectively fucked. One aspect that you have to know is that any damage that happens to your car will have to be repaired before entering a new tournament, and you do have to pay repairs. Now, Blackbox was considerate and included an option to pay for repairs with cash or markers you earn. Same goes for wrecks. Now that is cool, and the way you earn markers is easy and fast. Just know that Nevada Speedway will cost you most, if not all, of the total repair markers that you have. Oh yeah, maps. Whilst they talked about how Blackbox took the maps and made them stylish, the core layout of the maps is true to nature, and the game has a varied selection of maps that are located around the world. The progression, whilst without spoiling the game, is simple. You have 3 tiers of tournaments that unlock after you beat and dominate a certain amount of event days. Winning event days is easy. Just pass a threshold score, which you can do by being top 3 at the end of a race. Dominating requires you to effectively be first in the majority of races. That and breaking records, as each event has a record time or score that you have to beat. Breaking records matter, as you need to do those on each class to challenge class leaders, basically bosses. Once you break record number that is required for a boss tournament, you get to do 2 event days, with AI that can be effectively described as on meth. And once you beat them, you get to challenge a boss in 5 race challenges. Bosses are piss easy, by the way. I don't know what happened in development, but that was a large oversight. I'm sure that Ryo Watanabe, the final boss, isn't too Alright, that's just funny. I think that is it when it comes to me talking about the game. It's honestly a game that you have to experience yourself, as it genuinely is peak. Problem is that in 2007 and 2008, it was a commercial failure, and EA's CEO said that Prostreet was only an okay game and was not good, and that the next game would be a much better game with a considerably larger development cycle. That game being Need for Speed Undercover. I have played Need for Speed Undercover. EA is a truly garbage company, by the way. Before I talk about the run, I have to talk about Need for Speed World. I will be very brief, as I have only had low double-digit hours of playtime with the original game. I do know that a World client exists, however it is far from what the original EA's vision of the game was. You see, this game is actually fair. World was a free-to-play massive multiplayer online racing game. To quickly derail, EA released a few free-to-play online games around 2010, and EA quickly gained a negative reputation when it came to monetization and the pay-to-win aspect. And Need for Speed World is one of those games. The game was panned by pretty much everyone for its predatory microtransaction system. For example, whilst the game was technically free-to-play at launch, after reaching a certain level, you couldn't progress unless you bought a starter pack. This was removed a few months in. At launch, you also had upgrade kits that you bought with in-game cash, which was changed in an update completely to where you could buy performance parts, but only have the low tier ones with in-game cash and high tier ones by gambling. Of course, with real money. It's not a shocker that this game closed down almost 5 years later. One cool thing to say is that the Carbon and Most Wanted maps are connected, which is a cool thing, honestly. That and dynamic time of day, which meant that for the first time we could see Rockport at night and Palmon City at day. The run is... I mean, it's just alright, I guess. I could say that the most interesting part of the run is the fact that Michael Bay directed the trailer. I wish I would be wrong, but no, this game is just kinda mid. Let me talk about technical stuff, and more importantly, game engines. Since 2002, Blackbox Need for Speed games used a proprietary engine known as the EA engine, with the addition of the EA Graphical Library, or EAGLE. This gave the Blackbox games style and visuals that screamed Need for Speed and Blackbox. Frostbite is a first-person shooter engine that DICE developed for Battlefield and debuted with Bad Company. Visually, the engine was stunning, especially the Frostbite 2 engine that had 2 games that debuted with it, Battlefield 3 and Need for Speed The Run. Yes, The Run uses Frostbite, and apparently it took the team a year to repurpose the engine and make it suitable for racing games. That is very cool. The fact that they had to repurpose an engine instead of polishing up the game and adding more content is very EA. Visually, the run is great, but the offset that you get with that is that everything else kinda sucks. The handling is not that great, as the cars tend to have a bit of understeer, but I think the bigger issue is the input delay, which is really noticeable, and curbs that drag you away from the road, which, whilst realistic, does not belong in a Need for Speed game. Car variety is genuinely impressive. There are a ton of cars with multiple tiers. The customization is gone. You can pick a few body kits on car and change colors, but that is it. Granted, Hot Pursuit had no tuning whatsoever, so it is an improvement over that, I guess. The game's career, without spoiling, is set across America, where you start off at West Coast and race against 200 rivals to win the run. Cool name. Throughout the run, there are gas stations where you can switch cars. You have few event types. Sprint races, where you have to overtake a set amount of rivals, ranging from 6 to 10. Boss races, where you have to race against a certain notable person. time checkpoint events where you make up time, escape events where you escape the goons or the cops, and elimination events where you need to be in front of a rival to stop from getting eliminated. That is it. These are only a few game modes. I mean, considering the game is incredibly linear, you can't really have drift events, but man, those could have been in something like Challenge Series, which is really just races that you have to win and get under certain time. Kinda whack. Another whack thing is that you will notice is that the cutscenes are not skippable. To put it simply, the game has a quick time events. Because of course, the Michael Bay game needs quick time events. At least we got the gem that is the helicopter cutscene. Oh god, it's this part. It's this part. He hits the helicopter. He hits the helicopter. Loading times are also scripted. Having a fast SSD means shit, as the loading times are coded to last a bit. Music is great, honestly. Whilst there are a few licensed songs that are definition of alright, the dynamic soundtrack is where it's at. Genuinely masterfully composed soundtrack that I wish was more present in the game. The game was also very short, which was a disappointment. Fun fact, Autolog was so prevalent that the game's story aspects like level bonuses and photo mode were Autolog locked. The online aspect of the game is dead. You can't access photo mode without installing a mod. Granted, the game is also 30 FPS locked on PC. Thank you, Frostbite. And with that, I really got nothing to say about the run. And neither did EA, as right after the run's release, EA killed off Blackbox, which is such a sad way for a company to go. I want to say something positive, like there are still remnants of Blackbox's legacy, like the Skate franchise, but the latest game is such a shit show that the only thing it managed to do was ruin the last legacy of what Blackbox had. At least the modding community is strong. Well, thanks for watching. See you all soon with some big bangers perhaps. Also, the break I took was genuinely great, as I am now creatively motivated to make stuff again. And with that, I'll see you soon.